It was the woman's first time going to work with her best friend, and right there on the once dilapidated street, she saw a luxury car worth millions parked in front of her eyes. Her best friend encouraged her to seize the opportunity and complete her very first deal in her career. After hearing Kit's advice, Vivian took a deep breath and walked straight toward the luxury car.
Hey, Sugar, you looking for a date?
No, I want to find Beverly Hills. Can you give me directions?
Sure. For $5.
The man found it rare that even asking for directions required payment, and though he didn't want to engage, considering he was unfamiliar with this place, he finally chose to compromise. For Edward, who didn't care about money.
All right, okay. All right, you win, I lose. I change for 20?
For 20, I'll show you personal.
Having someone to guide him was certainly more convenient. Watching Edward's awkward driving skills, especially seeing him forget to turn on the headlights when starting the car, made Vivian suspect that this luxury car must be rented. Vivian voiced her suspicion, and the man's silence only reinforced her belief that she was right. At that moment, Vivian couldn't have imagined that Edward simply didn't want to waste words arguing. This car, which Vivian saw as a luxury vehicle, was actually Edward driving his assistant's car to keep a low profile. As for his lack of driving skills, that was because he always had a chauffeur whenever he traveled. After a short drive, Vivian, fed up with Edward's poor driving, took over the wheel herself, and during the trip, lectured him endlessly that pretending to be rich was not the right thing to do. But Edward, instead of getting angry over the misunderstanding and criticism, actually found it amusing. Wearing Edward's coat, they walked into the hotel together. Seeing the luxurious interior, Vivian couldn't help but think to herself how much effort Edward had put into pretending to be rich. They checked in at the front desk and were led by the staff to the most luxurious presidential suite on the hotel's top floor. Having lived at the bottom of society for years, Vivian had never seen such extravagance before. Compared to her shock and curiosity, Edward's calmness and composure made her begin to doubt her own assumptions. Maybe he really was a wealthy man after all. She didn't yet know that this chance encounter with Edward on the street today would completely change her entire life in the near future. After touring the spacious room, Vivian prepared to complete what would be the first business deal of her new profession. Seeing her eagerness, Edward smiled gently and told her there was plenty of time tonight. No rush.
Try me.
Being her first day on the job and not knowing the going rates, Vivian hesitantly quoted a number. Edward, without hesitation, agreed right away. Seeing how straightforward he was, Vivian started feeling a bit uneasy. She had heard from her best friend that those who didn't haggle and didn't make demands up front were often the most difficult clients. But she quickly realized her worries were completely unnecessary. Edward didn't force Vivian to do anything. On the contrary, he gave her complete freedom to do whatever she wanted in the room next morning. Without the exaggerated makeup, she appeared in Edward's sight with a completely different charm. After spending the night in the same room, Vivian became less reserved and casually asked Edward what exactly his job was, like chatting with a friend.
Buy companies.
What kind of...
Night. Before leaving after breakfast, Vivian thoughtfully helped Edward adjust his tie and then went into the bathroom for a bath. At the same time, Edward received a call from his assistant, Philip. The client wanted to invite him to dinner that night. To ensure the meeting would go more smoothly, Philip suggested Edward bring a female companion. Looking at Vivian bathing, Edward fell into deep thought. After the call ended, he walked to the bathtub.
I have a business proposition for you. Yes, I'd like to hire you as an employee. I will pay you to be at my beck and call.
Though Vivian was eager for this job, her remaining sense of reason made her ask her doubt. Someone as successful and wealthy as Edward surely had no shortage of women better or more suitable than herself. So why did he choose her?
I want a professional.
Edward's explanation made Vivian reluctantly accept it. Next, they discussed reaching an agreement on the work payment. Having learned he was a super rich man, Vivian no longer quoted a conservative number like last night, but instead asked for what to her was an astronomical figure. Just like yesterday, Edward agreed readily. As the partner of a super rich man, of course, she needed to be dressed in expensive outfits. Before going out to handle business, Edward left her a sum of money for her to dress herself up. After calling Kit to report her safety and show off a bit, Vivian went to a branded clothing store on the street. The moment she entered, she immediately attracted the attention of all the shop assistants, but none of them were willing to serve her. Perhaps feeling that this kind of attitude would hurt the brand's image, one female clerk reluctantly approached and boldly scrutinized Vivian's outfit. But the troubles didn't stop there. Without Edward by her side, Vivian, dressed in flashy clothes, was stopped by the lobby manager, Barney. While Barney was still suspicious, the waiter who had seen Edward and Vivian together the night before appeared, and, after confirming that Vivian was Edward's guest, Barney called her into the office without clothes. Not only that, before nightfall, Barney also specially taught Vivian some essential etiquette for business occasions. Finally, when the appointed time arrived, Vivian looked completely transformed. Seeing her back, Edward was initially hesitant to recognize her until that stunning face appeared before his eyes.
You're late.
You're stunning.
Afterward, Edward took Vivian to meet his client Morse and his grandson David. At the dinner table, Vivian saw for the first time the side of Edward that he had never shown in front of her. He was full of authority in his words and actions, and when it came to acquisition matters, he was tough and assertive. One moment he could be gentle and polite. The next moment, he could make decisive moves without caring about the client's face. After a half-hour-long negotiation, Morse and David left the table angrily. Although Vivian couldn't understand what they were talking about, it was clear that Edward had the upper hand in this negotiation. But why did he look so heavy-hearted? Perhaps knowing Vivian would only be a passerby in his life, or perhaps because he had long been without someone to confide in. Edward unusually opened up to an outsider. When he was very young, his father abandoned him and his mother. So, after achieving success in his career, the first thing he did was acquire the company his father founded, and then dismantled it from within, destroying nearly a lifetime of his father's hard work. They had since become enemies. Until last month, he received the news of his father's death. And today, seeing Morse and David united at the negotiation table reminded him of his father, which made him feel unexpectedly sad. As a listener, Vivian wisely said nothing. Not until Edward pulled himself out of that suffocating atmosphere did she begin to share some of her own difficulties. A night of heart-to-heart conversation silently planted a seed called affection in their hearts. And this seed would grow strong in the days they spent together afterward. The next morning, Edward curiously asked Vivian a question. Since he had given her an unlimited credit card, why did she only buy one outfit?
It wasn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be.
Why not?
They were mean to me.
After hearing the whole story, Edward immediately called to cancel the morning's meeting and accompanied Vivian to the city's most upscale clothing store. Seeing Edward's well-tailored suit, the store manager personally came out. Seeing Vivian surrounded by people, Edward left a credit card and left with peace of mind. Throughout the entire morning, Vivian was wrapped in the enthusiasm of the store clerks. After picking and choosing, she ended up buying nearly a week's worth of the store's sales. Besides the clothes she ordered to be sent to the hotel, she also kept several outfits with her. Carrying the clothes as she walked down the street, Vivian instantly regained her confidence. And the looks from people around her were clearly different from before. When she passed by the store that had once thrown her out,
No, I'm sorry. I was in here yesterday. You wouldn't wait on me? Oh, you work on commission, right? Yes. Big mistake. Big. Huge. I have to go shopping now.
even when Vivian left, the clerks still couldn't remember who she was. But none of that mattered anymore. For at this moment, Vivian's confidence no longer needed the clerk's regret to fill them in how they met. Hearing this, the heavy stone in Philip's heart was finally lifted. But at the same time, a hint of wickedness arose inside him. Seizing an opportunity when Vivian was alone, Philip followed her there.
Must be quite a change from Hollywood Boulevard. Yeah, Edward told me. Hey, don't worry, your secret is safe with me. Listen, maybe you and I could get together sometime after Edward leaves.
Philip's words were like sharp blades, mercilessly tearing apart the confidence Vivian had built up over this period. Her princess dream that had already taken shape was shattered in an instant, and she was dragged back to harsh reality. On the way back, she remained silent. Vivian prepared to pack her things, only to find that there was nothing here that belonged to her. Clever Edward guessed the reason behind it and began chasing after her to explain that he only revealed the truth to stop his assistant from becoming suspicious, and that he had no intention of looking down on her. Nor did he mean to insult Vivian's character in any way. But Edward's words still couldn't stop Vivian from finding the flashy outfit she had worn when she first arrived here. Standing still for a long time, Edward eventually took out the agreed $3,000. But Vivian only glanced at the money and didn't put it in her pocket. After she left, Edward also noticed the $3,000 still lying on the sofa. While Vivian was waiting for the elevator, Edward opened the door.
I'm sorry.
Vivian didn't take the $3,000 because she didn't want to put a transactional label on the time they had spent together, and this indirectly showed that she had developed feelings. Understanding the meaning behind her gesture, Edward came out to try to stop her, which also proved that he, too, had fallen for Vivian. The waiter, sensing the subtle tension of the moment, tactfully closed the elevator door. And after hesitating for a long time, Vivian chose to forgive Edward. Though they never explicitly mentioned canceling the employment arrangement, both of them silently acknowledged each other as lovers. In the days that followed, Edward no longer had any events to attend. All the remaining acquisition matters were handed over to Philip to handle. He only needed to show up at the end to sign the contract. And during this free period, Edward didn't stay cooped up in the hotel with Vivian like before. Dressed in an expensive gown and wearing a necklace worth more than a house, under Edward's arrangement, Vivian experienced her first ride on a... Finally, as the acquisition reached its final stage, they had to start facing the inevitable parting that would soon arrive. Vivian had grown up in this city since she was a child, and it was clearly unrealistic for her to travel around the world with Edward. So she wanted a status, a title that would allow her to live by his side without anyone daring to gossip. But before Edward could think about this issue, Philip called. The acquisition was complete, and all the terms were finalized, only waiting for Edward to come over and sign. Before leaving, Edward spoke earnestly to Vivian.
I have to go now. I heard everything you said. It's all I'm capable of right now.
Vivian said she completely understood and would wait for Edward to finish his work and come back. During the meeting, Edward, who kept thinking about this matter, lost his usual decisiveness. He paced back and forth in the conference room and finally seemed to make a certain decision. He asked everyone except the company's prince father. Walking out of the building, Edward didn't get into the car. He told the driver to leave first and walked alone toward the park. Having resolved the work issues, the next thing he had to face was his relationship with Vivian, and this contemplation lasted 2 full hours. On the other side, clueless about what had happened, Philip, unable to reach Edward by phone, came to the hotel. Inside the room, there was no one but Vivian, and Philip immediately had wicked thoughts. After a few drinks, he began to harass Vivian, repeatedly accusing her of being the reason Edward suddenly changed his plans, causing the company to suffer huge losses for no reason. His words were full of humiliation and contempt. At the critical moment, Edward appeared, and regardless of the years of working together, he knocked Philip to the ground with 2 punches. After Philip left resentfully, Edward immediately comforted the hurt Vivian. At her request, they sat on the steps to talk. Vivian knew that there would be no shortage of people like Philip around Edward, and it was impossible for him to teach every single one of them a lesson. In the end, it was because her past wasn't glamorous enough. Maybe separation was the best ending for both of them. The gap between their identities and social status was clearly not something that could be crossed so easily. Mutual affection was certainly beautiful, but once together, integrating into each other's circles was the real issue they had to face. Sensing Vivian's determination, Edward no longer tried to persuade her to stay. He first handed over a sum of money and then took out a business card from his pocket, reminding her that if she ever needed anything, she could call this number. This time, Vivian did not reject his kindness. At the door, Edward made one last request for Vivian to stay one more night.
I can't.
At their farewell, although both of them smiled on the surface, the reluctance in their hearts was something only they themselves knew. Vivian left, saying goodbye to the hotel that had once given her dreams of a different life. The story of the ugly duckling turning into a swan ultimately didn't happen to her. Perhaps such stories only exist in fairy tales. The pain of parting was long and bitter. The next morning, as Edward finished packing his luggage and was about to leave, a turning point appeared. After confirming that Vivian hadn't left him any messages, Edward took out the expensive necklace and asked Barney to return it to the jewelry store after his departure. He got into the car heading for the airport, remaining silent along the way. Barney's words, "It must take a lot of resolve to give up something so beautiful," echoed in his mind for a long time. The raindrops outside the window were just like Edward's heart at that moment, dull and chaotic. Looking at the car window, Edward thought of the cash Vivian had left behind the first time they argued. Leaving behind such a beautiful piece of jewelry, Vivian must have made a huge decision, which also proved the depth of her feelings for him. Thinking of this, he told the driver to pull over by the roadside, bought a bouquet of flowers, and then set off toward Vivian's home. Just as Vivian was stepping out to attend a job interview, she heard someone calling her from outside.
Vivian! Princess Vivian! Come down!
And paused. Edward had changed his direction for Vivian, also proving the strength of his determination. The two, finally moving toward each other, embraced a beautiful ending. Vivian, from someone living at the bottom of society to falling in love with the super-rich Edward, had walked a path full of thorns. From being looked down upon by the clothing store clerks to being humiliated by Edward's assistant, the gap of class stood like an unbridgeable chasm. But Edward was willing to set aside his acquisition plans, put aside his work, and devote himself entirely to being with her, while Vivian also bravely faced her past and stayed true to her heart for Edward. Their love crossed the barriers of the mundane world, proving the power of sincerity. This tells us that love is not about where you come from. As long as both sides understand and firmly protect each other, no matter how big the gap, it can be overcome. And ordinary people can also have extraordinary and passionate love.